The play on the field, the courts, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and promoters who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go behind the game with Patrick Klinger. Welcome to Behind the Game, presented by Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. I'm Patrick Klinger, president of Agile Marketing Partners. And I'm delighted today to be joined by two gentlemen that I've been trying to get on the show for quite some time, and I'm glad schedules finally worked out where I was able to get them here. We're going to talk about a topic that is really fascinating to me, and that's the relationship between an agent and a player in sports. So, Marcus Sherels is a Rochester, Minnesota native who had a standout football career at the University of Minnesota, followed that up with a 10-year career with the Minnesota Vikings. Today he is a businessman and a philanthropist. His agent is Chris Murray. Chris is a longtime friend of mine. Chris has managed over 200 professional athletes during his long career. Also a businessman, a volunteer, and a mentor to a number of young people. Gentlemen, welcome to Behind the Game.
Thanks, good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Marcus, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
You played at a high level, both in college and in the NFL, longer than most. And you also played a position where you took a lot of hits. Have you been able to walk away from the game healthy?
Yeah, for the most part. My body feels pretty good. I'm able to do things like play basketball. I'm into pickleball now a lot. I didn't really have too many significant injuries. I kind of had a foot injury at the end of my career, but other than that, I'm in one piece and can still play with my nieces and nephews and move around, so feeling good.
Yeah, you're a little young to be playing pickleball. No, I love the sport too. It's fantastic.
It's addicting,
It is.
Yeah.
Chris, tell us how you gentlemen met and how the relationship began.
So I've owned my own business with my co-partner for 24 years. And so Marcus was coming out of college. And as an agent will do, we'll recruit college players. And we isolated Marcus as a talent, probably underneath the radar a little bit. He had some injuries in college and probably wasn't on a lot of people's radar. And we had also represented his brother Mike, who was a linebacker at the University of Minnesota. And so we knew of Marcus, and even though they're brothers, the speed wasn't very similar. Mike, fair to say, was probably a run stopper, plug the hole guy, and middle linebacker. And Marcus ran a 4.34 on his Pro Day 40, so he ran like a gazelle. So yeah, we recruited Marcus, and he signed with us, and been together now for he had an 11-year career, and now we've been doing business stuff together for the last several years, and so that's kind of how we got to know each other. It's a little bit in the family, kind of.
Marcus, you were a walk-on at the University of Minnesota before you earned a scholarship. Then you went undrafted, right? Before you embarked on your long career in the NFL.
Yeah.
Did the fact that you were maybe always underestimated drive you a little bit to perform at a higher level?
Yeah, of course. Growing up, I was always told it was too small, not big enough, not fast enough to make it to the next level, whether it be college or the pros. But in our family, we just keep working hard and keep moving forward and give it our best shot. That's what I've always done.
Chris, I'm curious about your journey to becoming a sports agent. I know you played college football. And sports is a passion for you. But how did you make the transition from a collegiate football player into becoming an agent?
So my first job out of college was working for the PGA Tour in Jacksonville, Florida. And I'd spent 5 years there in marketing and licensing and got to know the players very well. And so one player was very persistent, named Tom Lehman, who's from the state of Minnesota. And Tom kept pushing me to start a golf agency with him and his brother and moved to Minnesota from Florida. So I happened to be up in Sioux Falls, I think, South Dakota one time, and I said, it's a few hours away. I'll drive up and check out Minneapolis. And at the time, I was just baking in the sun, and I drove up here. It was all overcast, and I'm like, wow, this feels great. So I decided to start that company with Tom Lehman and Jim Lehman, and ran Tom's career for 4 years. I did it from '94 to '98. Ran Tom's foundation, his Golf Charities Foundation. So as I kind of matured through various sports, got in the NBA for 6 years, did men's and women's golf, did Olympic athletes, did X Game athletes, and then on the NFL side, well, actually, I left that business with an opportunity to sign another player from the Twin Cities market, Sam Jacobson. So that got me into the interest of the NBA side, and so I formed another company with a guy named Rick Bourne, and Rick and I started this company back in 1998, and that's how I ended up in the agent business and took my business to all NFL back in 2011, right after the NFL lockout.
You know, you shared a little bit about how you and Marcus came to know each other, and that you reached out. I mean, what is the process like for you to go out and find prospective clients and to sell your services, convince them that you're really the best option for their career?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an art and a science, right? And it's very competitive. You have to kind of, at least the way I do it, is I identify people that I think I could align with pretty well. You know, I really don't want guys that have off the field issues. It's just, it's too much to mess with. In these days, you have to decide, you know, whether or not you're going to fund them in their training aspect prior to into the NFL draft or their pro day. You know, that can be cost prohibitive. If you miss and sign the wrong player enough times, you'll be upside down your business very quickly. So, you know, I'll try to find guys, you know, in the 5-state region. You know, I'm recruiting in Montana where I went to college. I'll recruit, you know, in various different states from time to time. It just depends. I'm recruiting a quarterback in the Big Sky that has no affiliation to anywhere in the 5 states, but yeah, I'll just find guys and just identify them and start building a relationship with them. Everybody starts early. You know, you start in the summer, you meet with them, and then you start to follow their career, and you meet with them and their parents after the games, and, you know, recruit them all through the process.
And Marcus, when you were looking for an agent, you wanted a shot at the NFL, what were you looking for in terms of somebody who was going to represent your career?
Yeah, I wanted a local person, just being from Minnesota. And then I remember I reached out to Chris, and we kind of connected on a lot of good things. And it's kind of, our relationship has developed from player agent to business partners and now we're like family, you know. I know all his children. We're all really close, and he's just been a really good role model for me.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about how that relationship did evolve from being a business relationship into personal. You know, I assume that in many cases that's not the case. It's very much
right.
Stays a business relationship, but you become friends, and you know, over the course of the career, and you stuck with Chris, and Chris stuck with you throughout, you know, maybe the trials and tribulations of the NFL.
Well, let me just say, it's probably easier for me to stick with him than him to stick with me. No, one thing I want to say about Marcus, he's probably one of the most loyal human beings I've ever met. And in this business, that says a lot in the agent space. And there was another local agent always trying to hit you up, you know, and Marcus would just simply come to me and tell me. And so, you know, we've always had that real strong bond that way, and I've always appreciated that about Marcus.
Chris, as an agent, you have to be a pitch man, right? You have to be a negotiator. You have to have a lot of business acumen. You probably have to be a counselor sometimes too, right? You know, and there's probably a little pressure knowing that you've got somebody's career in your hands. You know, when you step into the room to negotiate with the team, you know, that's his paycheck. It's the terms of his agreement. Maybe whether he gets signed or he doesn't get signed. Does that create a little anxiety sometimes?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in my career, I've always remembered the Bible verse where it talks about if you can't manage your own household, how can you manage somebody else's? And to me, I applied that to the agent world and just basically said, look, you know, I have to take care of my own in the mirror to make sure that I'm leading a life that is modeling something that somebody else can look at and respect. And I think that's where it starts, right? If you don't lead your own personal life, it's very challenging to come in and talk the talk, you better walk the walk yourself to be able to advise somebody on all personal matters, including their personal finances, including their strategy into a particular league, including handling and maintaining on the medical side, which can get super complex, to all of the social aspects of the business, to the PR side of it. It's a lot of responsibility, there's no question. But, as you grow and mature in this space, you learn, it's good to have other business, I believe, because the other business provides a greater sense of well-being overall, managing an athlete's career too. And eventually they move on from that career, and helping them bridge that transition into things that you've experienced, I think is, it's stuff that they can take and advance much quicker without making mistakes that many do to burn through the cash they've saved.
Mm-hmm. One of my dear friends is Caleb Truex, and I don't know if either of you know Caleb, but he was a professional boxer.
Yeah.
World champion until relatively recently. A great guy, great friend of mine. I will tell you, I was more anxious every time he got in the ring than he was. Right? And I suspect that maybe is a little bit of the case for you. When you're watching a game and seeing Marcus and one of your other clients play, you're pretty worried about them.
Yeah, I think the interesting question you always get is, what's your favorite team? And you basically answer, wherever I have a player playing and wherever the moment is happening when they're on the field. That's basically the answer. Did I grow up in Denver? Am I a Denver Broncos fan? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's always where my guys are playing and what they're doing.
Yeah. Marcus, how did you handle the inevitable competition that you faced every year with somebody who's trying to take your job, right? You're probably lockering near someone who's come in, and he wants to do what you're doing, and he wants to get your paycheck.
Yeah.
How difficult is that?
It was at first, because every year it seemed like they brought in somebody to replace me, the Vikings that is. But at the end of the day, you're not only trying out for the Vikings, but all 32 teams in preseason. You just give it your best shot, be someone that the coaches can rely on, and help out the young guys, whether they're replacing you or not. I've always been someone who had an open door, because the veterans, Antoine Winfield, Terrence Newman, when I came in, they always helped me. So I always try to pay it forward, and we all make each other better. So. Mm-hmm.
All NFL players make a lot of money, but there is a huge disparity in pay in the locker room, right? Mm-hmm. You've got quarterbacks who are making a phenomenal amount of money, mm-hmm. and then you've got guys who, are making the minimum. Does that create any problems in the locker room, or is that just sort of to be expected?
It's kind of expected. I don't think it causes any problems. The only thing that I would say is some of the guys that do make the big amount of money, they can't really put themselves in the shoes of us people on the end of the roster, because we could be gone after one bad practice, and if they have a couple bad games of practice, it doesn't really matter. So I'd say that's the only thing that I really noticed. But other than that, everyone's good, everyone's close. We're all brothers in there, and it's been fun.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. There's been a movement towards guaranteed contracts in the NFL, mm-hmm. which has not been the case. Of course,
mm-hmm.
it was the one sport, MLB, NBA, I think even to a degree the NHL, they've got guaranteed contracts. You sign, and that's what you're going to get paid, and mm-hmm. it doesn't matter what happens from that point on. But the NFL hasn't been that way until recently. What are your thoughts about guaranteed contracts? Because the risk of injury is so high in the NFL, do you think every contract should be guaranteed?
As a player, I'd love that, of course, but I also see the other side. There's so much turnover in the NFL and injuries. It's not like other sports where you're bringing 5 or 6 new guys in each and every week. But as a former player, I'd always advocate for guaranteed contracts, of course.
It seems like it's going in that direction more and more, and certainly for the skilled players, mm-hmm. right? And then you have a player like Dalvin Cook, 27 years old, been one of the best running backs in the NFL, really, since he came into the league, mm-hmm. and he's not playing right now. As a player, that's got to be a little bit scary as well, isn't it? Because now the games have started, and you're not signed, and there's no money coming in. And he's probably in the prime of his career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure with Dalvin, I'm kind of sure it's his decision. If he wanted to sign somewhere tomorrow, I'm sure he could. So he'll do what's best for him and his family, and he's obviously a remarkable player, and he'll have no problem.
Chris, there must be times where you have to tell a client that his career is over, right? You can't find a home for him, or medically he can't do it anymore. What's that situation like?
Well, there's the saying that the player is usually the last one to know when their career is over. And sometimes, I always say to my guys, I'll stay with you until you take your last breath as this athlete. Because, there are multiple ways in the NFL or in the football space to be able to just make that decision. And oftentimes it's made for you anyway. And, market really determines whether or not it's time, aside from physicality and injury. So I think that, working with an athlete that's coming to the end of their career, the best part is that they have a plan beyond. And to see some of them start to work on that when those years are starting to wane in advance of that. So it's just not falling off the edge. Now, many of them have saved plenty of money where they can take that time and they can, but most of the time emotionally, spiritually, all of that's overcomes the financial situation, and emotionally they're distraught. Yeah. So I think it's it's a challenging experience for them, but the ones that I've seen do it well plan early.
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because you're absolutely right. In my time even in Major League Baseball, I saw that. I saw guys who, one day everybody wanted their autographs. Restaurants wanted them to come in and eat dinner, and then they're out of uniform, and things change in a hurry, and it's a giant adjustment. How did you prepare yourself for the transition? Because you seem like you've done a really terrific job of being able to move from wearing a uniform to becoming a businessman and philanthropist, but were there things that you did during your career that prepared you for that transition?
Can I answer that to set him up for that answer?
Go ahead.
So Marcus,
it's a perfect agent.
Marcus is very unique in that regard. He lived in his brother's basement for how many years of your career?
4 or 5, probably.
He rented a townhome for how long?
4 or 5.
It took you how long to have a smartphone versus a flip phone?
Halfway through my career, for sure. Yeah.
Until they had the drug test in London, right? I
Yeah.
think was the trigger.
Yeah.
And so not all athletes are that conservative, but the beauty of what he did, and every year, if you remember, in the papers, the line was, is this the year Marcus Sherels will get released? Is this the year? Every year. But he padded so much cash and saved so well based on how he didn't spend. Because that's the key piece, right? How much you spend, it really determines how much you have left over. And he did a great job of conserving that. And he bought his first house in the last year of your career.
I did.
First house, after 11 years, right?
10, yeah.
10, something like that, yeah.
Well, that's terrific. And where did that come from? Was it your parents who taught you that to be conservative and frugal?
Yeah, we've always just been simple, our family, nothing too extra, and to this day I'm the same way. I don't live a very rich and lavish lifestyle. I'm pretty simple. I have my friends and family, and I like to play video games, sports, hang out with family, and stay active. So.
And you're still an important part of Rochester, too, I understand. You go back to your hometown quite often and volunteer.
Yeah, the community of Rochester has been great throughout my entire career. I'm from there. It'll always be home. My mom and stepdad still live down there. I try to go back and visit schools and see my friends and be out in the community because the support's been amazing.
Yeah, go Big 9.
Yeah.
Charles Barkley once said that just because he was a professional athlete did not make him a role model. And it was very controversial at the time, but he said, look, because I can dribble and I can shoot and I can rebound, don't make me a role model. That's the job of parents. What do you think about that? As somebody who wore a uniform, both for the University of Minnesota and for the Minnesota Vikings, did you feel like you needed to be a role model?
Maybe not that I needed to, but I wanted to, for sure. Growing up, I never met a professional athlete. I always looked up to them, was always watching sports, keeping up with the athletes, and when I got a chance to be put on that kind of pedestal, I took advantage of it and tried to make the most of it and impact as many lives as I could.
Yeah. And Chris, what do you tell your clients about that? I mean, you must do some counseling with them where you say, hey, do the right thing, behave, stay out of the newspapers, be careful when you go out at night.
I kind of would parallel that when you buy real estate. How well you buy determines how well you exit. And on the front side, how well you recruit an athlete and know what you're getting really defines a lot of that along the way. So if you find high character guys, they're going to be great role models for those kids along the way. If you find guys that have had, and I'm all about rehabilitation for sure. I love on guys, come alongside them for sure too. Mm-hmm. But, there are some that you just know probably aren't going to fit that category. And you take the risk and roll the dice if you want that type of client. I just haven't chosen that mm-hmm. path just because sometimes it's impossible to change the lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Yeah. So there's 600 and some odd players to choose from every NFL. Mm-hmm. It's part of the reason I got out of the NBA. There's a very narrow subset of players there you can recruit in the NBA, but in NFL you got a lot to pick from. So as an agent, you can choose wisely.
Well, the Vikings found out, their first-round draft choice this year made a bad mistake a couple of weeks ago, driving a little too fast, and I'm sure that was a wake-up call for him. I certainly hope so. That, just because you got a lot of money in your pocket right now and you can buy an expensive sports car, bad things still happen, right? I mean, Henry Rugg is mm-hmm. a great example of that.
Yeah,
things can go sideways in a hurry.
Yeah, I feel bad for that kid in some ways, but he was playing with chemistry, with speed and alcohol. Yeah. Bad combination.
It is. Chris, you mentioned that you previously represented golfers. You also did some things in the NBA. Now it's exclusively football, right? How difficult was it to represent athletes in different sports? Because the dynamic between professional golf and what you're trying to accomplish is probably a whole lot different than the dynamic in professional football.
Yeah, I mean, it starts kind of at the top a little bit. You have to understand collective bargaining agreements on different sports, but the travel is really a big part of that too. I mean, when you're going to snowboard events and golf tournaments and center court and NBA and football stuff, that's a crazy schedule. So it just became too much to live in all of those verticals for me anyway. But yes, it's very different. I mean, the mentality of a golfer is way different than the mentality of an NBA player.
So when you're representing a golfer, are you basically trying to find sponsors for them? Because once they make it to the tour, they've got the ability to play in the tournaments. You don't necessarily have to sign them. But what you're looking for, I assume, are the Callaways and the Pings of the world to come in and...
Yep, they're all the manufacturing agreements, and then it's all the corporate agreements that the players have. So yeah, you're selling them as billboards, really. You're selling everything from the hat to the bag to the collar to the sleeve. Yeah, it's a different world. I was in golf for so long, and the way recruiting works in golf is you go recruit at the college tournaments. Mom and dad usually are, dad's up by the green, mom's in the fairway, and the agent will get the mom for a little bit, walk the hole with her. Mm-hmm. Then the other agent will take the mom on the next hole. Then you work your way up. Dad usually doesn't want to talk to the agent. They try to stay in the trees, and you're just navigating this for 18 holes. Mm-hmm. And I got a little tired of chasing that white ball with those guys. But I had a great run at Casey Martin, as you know, with the mm-hmm. Supreme Court. We went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court with Casey, and that was quite epic on that legal front.
Yeah. Most agents operate in relative anonymity, but there are those agents like Scott Boras and Drew Rosenhaus that are very well known as sports fans, right? What's the difference with those guys? What have they been able to do to establish themselves as really power brokers in sports?
They've signed a lot of the right guys in the right conference, and that would be called the SEC. You know, in Rosenhaus, I mean, obviously, if you can dominate those, I mean, obviously, the Big Ten now is quite prolific. But, you know, they've signed the right players that have just made a name for themselves at a high level, and they also have character. Character flaws. So once somebody shows up on the radar for something off the field and their agent is present, all of a sudden, there's a brand built.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the businesses you're involved with now in Rochester. And perhaps you've got some businesses here as well, but I'd love to hear about what you're doing together and what you've got going on.
Yeah, the first one is ETS. I partnered with Adam Thielen and Ryan Engelbert. It's a training center for athletes ages 8 through the professional level. I think there's 30 locations now. I partnered with the one in Rochester with them, and that's doing really well. Something the city really needed for a long time. I remember growing up, we just go bench press and shoot hoops at the local Y, and now there's an actual training facility, so that's good. Another one is Chip Shots. I mentioned pickleball earlier. We have 3 indoor pickleball courts, some golf simulators, and then a bar restaurant. And then together we partnered with Nashville Coop, who's up in the cities, and we brought a restaurant. It's a hot chicken restaurant down to Rochester.
It's one of my favorite places. I go to it all the time on Snelling.
It's really good food, really good.
Fantastic. Good. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a quick, really quick conversation. Could stay here all afternoon, but appreciate it very much. And thank all of you for watching Behind the Game, presented by Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. I'm Patrick Klinger, and we'll see you again next month.